Hey friends, it's Lauren Taylor. Thanks for joining me in my craft room today. I'm grateful to have you here for a pretty pink Posh project video. I'm going to be creating a box card using one of my favorite pretty pink Posh stamp sets, the Penguin Pals. I'm going to be using the Scallop box card dies and the Layered Mittens stencil 3-pack. I have some different types of blue cardstock, and I'm going to be using the colors of these shimmer confetti mixes, aqua, mint, and purple, to inspire my colors today. I also have a few sentiment stamp sets. I'm using the holiday script stamp set and the sentiment strip dies, and I end up just using the sentiment strips Christmas clear stamps for my sentiment, but I grabbed both of my sentiment stamp sets just in case. I didn't know what sentiment I was going to use yet. So I'm going to start with stenciling. I trimmed my light blue cardstock to be 6 by 6 so it will fit perfectly behind my layered mitten stencil. And I'm going to start with the A stencil. Once I get it on my little stencil mat, my glass board is magnetic, so I'm going to also use my magnets to help hold things in place. I'm going to start by coloring in all of the mittens with cracked pistachio distress ink. It does take me a little while because I only have the tiny little ink pad. I definitely need to start investing in some larger stamp pads or ink pads, and then I will completely cover in all the mittens with a nice pale minty green look. Next, I'm going to grab Salty Ocean, and I was thinking I was going to use it for the bee stencil, which are the little cuffs of the mittens, but I'm going to change my mind. But I will get out my Salty Ocean Distress ink pad and another blending brush that I use for blue inks. And here's when I go, nope, I want to do the snowflakes in blue on the details of the mittens. So I switched out to the sea stencil, and then I am coming in with that blue ink through all the details on the mittens. Once I'm all done with that, then I'll switch it over to the bee stencil, which is again the cuffs of the stencil or the cuffs of the mittens stencil, and then I will grab Wilted Violet Distress ink and add that as well. So just using my magnets to help me hold my stencil and paper in place, and then I switch to different colored family brushes that I have, and I'm just ink blending. And I'm sorry I'm so shaky. I'm a very aggressive ink blender. I don't know if anyone else is like me, but I go a little crazy when I ink blend. So once I get all of those cuffs done, let's do a good stencil reveal, which is my favorite. And surprisingly, I know I didn't use any stencil paste this time, but I will get out some metallic watercolor to do some splatter. So these are Starry Color different gold pigments, and I'm going to use the white gold or the white metallic watercolor. I added some water and I grabbed a paintbrush and I splattered a bunch all over this background, and I will set it aside to dry because I will do some die cutting once that watercolor splatter is all dry. I'm bringing out the darker blue cardstock, and I cut out the base of the card box or the box card, and then two of what I call the shelves pieces. And my stenciled background is dry, so I went ahead and cut out the background, the two side pieces, and two of the small rectangle pieces. So I'm going to add the details onto my box card, but I'm not going to glue my box card together yet. So I'm just reinforcing those score lines by folding over the pieces. You don't really need a bone folder for these types of score lines. They're great. You can just fold them easily on your own. I'm going to use a tape runner to attach these pieces, these scallop pieces, to my dark blue backgrounds, I guess you could say. And so I added tape adhesive to the arch and glued that to the back of the box card. And I will then glue the rectangle pieces to my little shelf pieces. So just adding plenty of adhesive to make sure they stay on. And I also don't know which way I want my mittens to point. I think I want the cuffs to be more towards the top so you can see more of the purple because that is going to be the color that inspires my penguins. I absolutely love doing colorful penguins. I think it just brings a lot more of a whimsical look to winter projects. And then I am gluing these side pieces to the outside. So I flipped over my Scallop box card die, the base, and I'm gluing these what I guess would be considered the back at this point. So when I put together the box card, they will be on the outside sides. Okay, so I'll go ahead and set those pieces in my little tray here where I have my shimmer confetti mixes, and we're going to move on to stamping. So like I said, this is my favorite Pretty Pink Posh stamp set, or one of. Of course, we all have many favorites, but I absolutely love these cute little penguins, and I'm going to stamp them on some alcohol marker friendly white cardstock, and I'm using an alcohol marker friendly black ink, and I'm using my Misty, so I'll go ahead and stamp them twice to make sure I have a nice solid clean line. And I zoomed in here to show you my alcohol markers. I am using Ohuhu art markers to color in my penguins, and I have my caps on screen, but I'll do my best to make sure I describe each one. So I'm starting with V270, and that will be the darker shade of my penguins. And then I'm bringing in V250, and that is the lighter shade for coloring in what would normally be the black, I guess, of the penguin. So I'm only using 2 shades. These images aren't very large. The biggest area to color in is actually going to be white. So I only really need 2 shades for most of my coloring. I think I do 3 when I get to using blue and green. But for the penguins, the darker part of them is only 2 colors. Now for the white part of the penguin, I wanted to create a shadow, so I grabbed a lighter V230, and then I just went around the edge, kind of following the design, the lines, and I'm using my colorless blender to help just spread that color out a little more to make it a little more faint, and it will dry back as the alcohol ink dries, and it will just look like a nice little shadow, like there's a nice purple hue to my penguins. I used Y6 to color in the beak and little feet of my penguins, and I brought back Y250 to add in some cheeks. I was going to bring in pink, but I thought using purple would still be really cute for these adorable little penguins, and I colored the rest of them in because it was all the same style of coloring. For the blue, I'm starting with B070 and then as my dark tone, and then B050 as my medium tone, and I'm coloring in the hats. So I'm going to switch off the colors between the 2 different hats. So one will be mostly blue, and then the details will have green, and then my present will be blue with a green ribbon. And the lightest shade that I'm using for blue is B030. I really wanted it to have a matching color to, the box card so far and the confetti mix. So now I'm bringing in my green for the mint look, and the darker tone is G360. And I'm just coloring opposite of what I did for the hats, and then coloring in the pretty ribbon bow details for the present. My midtone is G340, and I was only going to use 2 tones for this, so I colored in the ribbon and the hat details, but when I was coloring in the actual hat on the one on the side there, I wanted a little bit lighter for the top, so I brought in G320, and I'm just going to go over the rest of the green that I colored. I have a white gel pen that I'm going to use to add little white dots to their cheeks, as well as some highlights just around my images. I like doing this. It's obviously completely optional, but I just think it gives it more of a fun cartoon look. I used the coordinating dies and cut out my images, and now I'm ready to actually assemble my card. So I decided that I'm going to use these mittens with the snowflakes as the front of my box card. So I'm adding more adhesive to the little side flaps of my first shelf, and I'll go ahead and line those up to the front pieces, so the front of those side pieces, and I like to fold them over both ways, make sure that no matter which way the card lays, it will be flat. Now, I went back and forth with how I wanted to add the middle shelf, and I decided that it was going to go more towards the middle, and I wanted it sticking out just a little bit outside of the side edges. I really love, I'm sure you follow Davina over on Instagram, and she's also on the Pretty Pink Posh design team, and she makes the coolest box cards. So I was trying to channel my inner Davina when I was putting this card together. And so I wanted my back shelf to show a little more. So I brought it up just a tiny bit past the side edges, which you'll see later on. But it still looks really good, like it's not sticking too far out of the box. Now I'm using my jewel picker here to add glue to the tops of my cute little penguins' heads, and then I use my jewel picker to pick up the pieces and add them to the tops of my penguins, and same with adding this little present into the little flippers of that cute penguin who looks like it was designed to hold something, so I loved putting the little gift in its arms. Now I'm going to have my two little penguins leaning into each other be on the back, and I think I'm going to pop them up. I don't like usually trying to add very much dimension to my box cards because it's already going to be thicker as it is an interactive pop-up box card, but I really wanted them to be kind of popping off the background, so I added some foam adhesives behind those and added them to the background. So it looked like their feet were just about touching the middle shelf piece of my box card. And then I'm taking my two other penguins and adding adhesive only about halfway up their bodies and gluing them to the front of that middle shelf piece. So that way it just kind of looks like they're all standing together, and you can see the two penguins leaning into each other in between my two penguins that are glued to the shelf piece of my box card. Now it's time to jump into our sentiment. I'm going to be using the scallop rectangle with the stitch details and the smaller rectangle. These are all kind of the medium size of the sentiment strip dies, and I'm going to do some layering. So I'm going to die cut the scallop stitch die from my vellum, the rectangle stitch die from the darker blue cardstock, and then I will use the smaller thin rectangle to actually cut out my sentiment once I've stamped it. So I'm adding more white cardstock into my MISTI, and I'm just using the same black ink so there's consistency in my ink, and I do stamp it twice again just like I did with my penguins. And I stamped Winter from the Holiday Script stamp set and Season's Greetings from the Sentiment Strips Christmas. And I will use that rectangle die, and I'm going to use my grid to help make sure I get that as centered as possible. I probably should have die cut it before stamping, but that's okay. And then I used the coordinating die for Winter and ran that through my die cut machine. So I'll go ahead and glue all of my layers together for my sentiment. So I'm going to glue my stamped white rectangle to the blue stitched rectangle, and I'm just going to center that right into that die. I love that these sentiment strip dies are so easy to layer together. And then the blue one will go on top of the vellum scalloped rectangle. So those little vellum scallops will peek out from around the blue rectangle, and then I'm adding glue just to the bottom of the word Winter, and again using my grid to try to help get that centered, and I'm gluing it to the blue rectangle, so just above my Season's Greetings sentiment. And now I will add that to the front of my box card. And again, I'm going to use a little more foam adhesive. I really just wanted this card to look very 3D. So I'm just using some foam adhesive strips. These are 1/8 of an inch wide. And I added it behind Winter as well as the rectangle. And I'm making sure it's going to look good, and I'm adding it to the center of the front, and that Winter will pop up perfectly in between my two little penguins. Now it's time to add in those confetti mixes. Again, I'm using shimmer confetti in aqua, mint, and purple. And I'm going to do 3 of each. So I'm going to add 1 to the back arch with the two penguins leaning into each other. I will have 1 on the middle section, my little shelf with my other two penguins. And then I'll also add 1 of each color to the front around my sentiment. So I'm just pouring them into a little confetti holder tray and using my jewel picker after I add some glue to the card to pick up the sequin and place it onto my box card. Here's a final look of how adorable and beautiful and winter color, kind of that cool color scheme for this box card. I just love those cute little penguins, and I love that they're on a box card. They're so fun. I hope this card inspired you today to break out maybe some of your older winter sets and mix them in with some new. I had a lot of fun creating this box card, and I hope you had fun following along too. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll click like, and if you're new here, I hope you'll subscribe and come back. As always, you can find everything I use down below in the description box. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye!